Hello everyone, my name is John Bristow. I'm a member of the Developer Relations team at Progress. I'd like to thank you for taking the time to watch today's webinar. Joining me are my colleagues Tara, Alyssa, Ed, and Carl. Together, we'll walk you through the features we've added to the R1 2018 release of Kendo UI. The theme for today's webinar is to show you how Kendo UI helps you build better apps faster. We've added a whole set of new features to accomplish that and deliver an enhanced user experience. Before we begin, it's important to let you know that everything we'll be showing you here is now available online. So, please make sure to check out the progress updates available through your account. Now, webinars can be tough to sit through. If you get distracted or pulled away from your desk, don't worry. This webinar will be available on YouTube. You can find our channel at youtube.com/Telerik. Our goal is to answer as many questions as possible on Twitter through the Hey Kendo UI hashtag. Please use this hashtag because it will help us find them. We'll be giving away a LEGO Mindstorms EV3 to one lucky attendee who asks the best question. We'll also be drawing someone at random to win a drone with an integrated camera. It's our way of thanking you for being here for today's webinar. Please note that this prize is subject to our sweepstake rules. A couple more housekeeping items to mention. Everyone should keep an eye open for the wrap-up blog post that we'll be publishing shortly after the conclusion of today's webinar. You'll find this up on the Telerik blog site, which you can find at blogs.telerik.com. And now I'd like to pass things over to the product manager for Kendo UI, Carl Bergenham.
Hey everybody, Carl Bergenham here, and I want to kick things off by taking a look at some of the highlights of what's new in R1 2018 with Kendo UI. Starting with some core library updates, we took a look at the backlog that we have of issues and bugs across Kendo UI, and I can say that with this release we've covered over 250 issues that we resolved, and this is a huge bug fixing effort that went through the core library and can therefore be seen in our jQuery offering, our UI for ASP.NET MVC offering, and our UI for ASP.NET Core offering as well. On top of this, we've improved our OData support by enabling batch editing functionality in the data source in Kendo UI. The scheduler now supports drag and drop of multiple events, a big feature that a lot of you have been asking for in the scheduler. And we took the button group out of the old Kendo UI mobile library and put that in with the rest of Kendo UI in that namespace. Now, one thing that I'm very excited to announce with this release with R1 2018 is that we have a batch of new React components. And these are built from the ground up, are not dependent on any library whatsoever. And this is a library that we're going to continue to expand throughout 2018 and beyond. This initial release contains the grid and a lot of features included in the grid. We have editing, we have paging, sorting, filtering, combined with Redux. You can work with your own state if you want to. We also have the drop-down list, calendar, date input, numeric text box, so a lot of your forms are covered. And we also have the panel bar, tab strip, and an animation framework. There's a ton more that I encourage that you go ahead and check out on our overview page. We've also enhanced the support that we have for the React wrappers and for our Vue components. With R1 2018, all of our Kendo UI components are now available as Vue components. We've also gone ahead and added Vue templating as a part of our Vue support. And for our React wrappers, we've gone ahead and added a ton of additional components as well. On the Angular side of the house, we've done a lot of updates, and we've included 3 brand new components. And these are among the top voted components in a user voice portal. And this includes the new TreeView component, the new splitter component, and the new window component. The grid has received a lot of love as well, including column resizing and reordering, a new filter menu similar to that of what we've had in jQuery, and this is fully accessible, supporting all the latest and greatest standards within accessibility. We've done other various updates in Angular as well, including features spread out across all the components and updates to our themes, including the material theme and updates to Bootstrap v4.
Thanks, Carl. I'd like to spend the next few minutes diving deeper into what's new in Kendo UI for jQuery developers. Let's start by talking about batch processing support in the data source component. The OData protocol defines a way to query and manipulate data through a simple set of operations. Now, occasionally, it can be advantageous to execute these operations as a batch. Doing so can reduce the number of requests hitting a service endpoint and, as a result, improve the overall scalability of your solution. Batch processing is a part of the OData specification, and it's facilitated by grouping multiple operations into a single HTTP request payload. Now, the data source component for Kendo UI has a long history of supporting OData, but a couple of things have been missing in terms of its compliance with the specification. In particular, batch processing support. The latest release introduces support for conducting batched operations against OData-based service endpoints through the data source component. Now, some of you might be wondering, wait a minute, the data source has supported batch operations since the first version of Kendo UI, and that's true. However, that hasn't been the case for the OData protocol, and that's because the implementation details for supporting batch processing are different from protocol to protocol. Let's see how this works using the grid, which, incidentally, now supports this capability. Here, I'm using one of the examples we provided in the UI for ASP.NET MVC examples repo up on GitHub, so if you want to follow along, feel free to clone it and try it out for yourself. This grid has been configured to use an underlying service that supports the OData v4 protocol. I'll make a few changes like editing the values here and here. To trigger the update through a batch operation, I'll click the Save Changes button. I'll now bring up Chrome DevTools and navigate to the Network tab. Here you can see the batch request that's been made to the service endpoint. Support for OData v4 batch processing is evidenced by the content type request header here and by the request payload here. Support for this capability is built into Kendo UI. There's no heavy lifting necessary to make this work. It's simply a matter of specifying the batch property to true on the bound data source. Overall, this is great news for developers targeting endpoints that support OData. Furthermore, it's worth noting that more improvements to the v4 spec compliance will be made throughout the year. Next is the button group widget. The button group has long been a part of the hybrid mobile solution for Kendo UI. It's a widget that presents a contextual menu of options that's typically found at the top of a page. It can be used to filter data, swap elements, and anything else a developer wants to provide. Now, historically, it's been non-optimal to include the button group when building desktop or responsive web applications. That's because it's resided in the mobile library of Kendo UI. With this release, we've added the button group to standard Kendo UI in order to make it easier for developers to target. Speaking of targets, we've updated the dependencies for Kendo UI across the board. Libraries like JSZip, Paco Deflate, and even jQuery itself have been updated to reflect some of the latest changes that have gone into them. This should help developers looking to take advantage of the features they introduce. The scheduler is a popular widget in Kendo UI. With it, you can get an Outlook-like interface for scheduling events across a timeline. In the latest release, we've added support for moving multiple events through drag and drop. This feature is supported by simply setting the selectable property to true. Multiple events may be selected by pressing down on the Control key. This feature will improve the overall usability of the scheduler widget for users. Now let's turn things over to the newest member of our team. Alyssa will be walking you through the latest features added for Kendo UI for Angular developers.
Hello everyone, my name is Alyssa Nichol as introduced, and I am the newest member to the Progress DevRel team. My title is Angular Developer Advocate for Kendo UI, and I'm so excited to be here to talk about the updates in Angular for our 2018 release. So, quick introduction, that was me. Also, wanted to give you this link ahead of time. If you are following along, and you want to be able to have quick access to some of the links I'm going to bring up under telerik.com, kendo/angular/UI. If you go to the release history, you'll see at the very, very top, we're covering the 2018 release, and we'll just be diving right in. So yeah, this is a handy link. All right. So as you probably saw in the RSVP, we're going to be hitting on some pretty cool things like new components like the TreeView, window splitter, gauges, also the enhancements to the grid. Going to cover those. So we really just need to get going if we're going to fit in our time limit. So the TreeView, yes, I created a demo app for today, and currently it's running. It's just an Angular project that I spun up with the CLI. It's running at localhost 4200, as one would expect with ngserve, and I created a couple of components. TreeView, you'll see here, grid, gauge. So if we go ahead and jump straight into TreeView, you can see that I have just created a component. It's got an HTML file where I'm pulling in the TreeView, and then it has the TypeScript file, which I started off by using the demo TreeView. So if you go to our UI components page and scroll down, you can see all of the components we have to offer, TreeView being one of them. And so what I did was I followed along, which our docs are actually really phenomenal. Being new to the team, I'm still combing through them and learning more and more, but the more in depth I go, the more I find out. I'm like, wow, this is like really well documented. So definitely check them out if you haven't yet. But on the installation process, ran through this with literally no issues. Installed the Angular TreeView along with the animations because it's a dependency, as well as common in core and RxJS, as you can see down below. And then if we go to my hang on, let me just go ahead and go app module TS. So we go to my app module. You'll see here where I have I generated the project, and then all the green is the stuff that I added in. I was a busy beaver. So added in the TreeView, and then down here, if we scroll in the imports, the TreeView, as well as things like the gauges and layout, tab strip, things like that, they're all in the imports. And if we go back over to our TreeView component, like I said, I started off with just the default demo, and then I kind of I wanted to add some more, fun. So I thought, hey, what would be more fun than furniture and carpet? Because not that furniture isn't the most exciting thing, but it just doesn't get me too excited. So I decided, let's just pull up the project, shall we? So I decided to use doggies. So I wanted to pull in types of dogs. So if we go to back over here, you'll see that I created a public type of dogs, and then inside of my ng on init, I'm sorry for the super rudimentariness of this. I know it should probably be in a service. I just didn't do that. So forgive me. I thought it might be a smidge page easier if all of the stuff we were talking about was in one place. But anyways, don't follow this convention. Just pay attention to what I'm talking about and we'll all be fine. So anyways, I imported the HTTP, there's way too many T's in that, client, and I'm using this.get. And I'm passing this beautiful dog.ceo to grab a list of breeds. And I'm going to then loop through, and this is a super duper important part. So if you're super excited about the TreeView like I was, but then you try to go use it with whatever random data you happen to have handy, it probably most likely isn't going to be formatted properly. Yay! So let's just cover this right here, right now, so that nobody's going to be freaking out. We're going to go over to TreeView demo. We talked about how I npm installed, threw in those into the module imports. Yes, we've got it. Make sure you have a theme. All this should be pretty standard for you if you've ever used Kendo. If not, like I said, our docs are pretty killer. Anyways, so back to our current task at hand, understanding how the data has to be structured. So it has to be an array of objects. Don't stop there. An array of objects with text and item properties. where text is the label and items is in another array of objects. So I know that sounds super crazy and fandangled, but essentially see how we have text here. It has to say text. It can't be like Bob or something as your key. And then you have another set of objects, and those also have to have text as the key. So without further ado, let's check out our loops. So I have a couple of loops here to drill down into the object and grab the bit of data that we need and push it into the objects inside the array properly. And once we do that, I'm literally just being like, hey, TreeView, which is right here. I'm setting the nodes to data. And if you noticed, I'm saying this dot data because that's the variable that I'm just pushing all of this goodness into. And so I put the 3 little demos that I'm talking about today inside of tabs because I thought that would just be super clean and nifty. So inside of our first tab, this TreeView with all the doggies, and these, my good friends, are nodes on the TreeView. And if we go over to like Greyhound, you've got Italian, Hound, you got a really long list. This I wrapped. So if we want to actually just, we're gonna get like super nerdy on you here. Bolder, bigger, bolder, better. Okay. So I went ahead and like was playing with styling things, because that's what I do. I play with styling all the things. So I grabbed this UL and I told it to be flex, and then I told it to wrap, and I gave it like a max height of 200, but we could probably go ahead and bump that up to like 600 pixels. And as you'll notice, this is just really one long column, and it's wrapping because I told it to. But really, you could have one long list of things if you wanted. It's really up to you. But yeah, so these are TreeView nodes, and that was the TreeView. And I don't think I missed anything. But yes, do ensure that your data is structured properly, and you'll have a wonderful time with the TreeView. Other than displaying data, I also want to go over that. I thought this was really cool when I was like, what? It does more things than just that. Hold on to your pants. So yes, you can, I should probably I always forget to make the text like big. Okay. So this is also the TreeView. But as you can see, there's like checkboxes, which is so super cool. Could you see how I checked furniture and then like all of the sub-children were selected? If I unselect decor, then like all of these are unselected. So it's like pretty darn nifty. So they have other modes other than just like display that are really cool. And we don't have time to dive into all of those and how to use them. But again, check out the docs. Super awesome. Okay. New fancy gauges. We've got 3 of them. I'm pretty sure the arc is the one. I'm going to click on this, open up the docs, is the one that I went ahead and threw into our project. And so there's 3, like we said, the arc, linear, and radial. And if we go back over to our project and click on gauge, here's the beautiful gauge. And inside of the component, it's like being told at different percentages to change color. So that's pretty fun. And this is just a Kendo slider element. Let's go back over to our codes. If we go to our app module TS, so a couple of things were needed here. We needed to include the slider module from Kendo Angular Inputs, and then the gauges module from Kendo Angular Gauges. And of course, as we did before, make sure you put those inside of the imports. And at that point, I wanted to, it's totally unnecessary, but I created a gauge component. And just like our other one, I put the gauge goodness in the HTML file. And this is the color changing things that I was talking about. But if you are following along and you're on our docs, looking at the gauges, components, like we said, go back to this and hit gauges. You can check out this demo among many other demos to look at all of the cool fun gauges. I think these are really useful on like dashboard pages to display just really anytime that you can display information in like not block text form is like really, really helpful to users. And probably retain it more, make more of a point. So it's really, really cool that they added this in. So check out the gauges. Back over to our doc. So splitter window material theme. Yes, I'm going to try to stay within 5 minutes here. So we've got 3 things to talk about real quick. The splitter. So the splitter, it's, as it says, it cuts the page into different sections, and it lets you control like the size and layout of those sections. So down here in the example, as you can see, these literally bars or splitters on the page that are resizable. So makes sense, pretty straightforward. And if you scroll down below, you can check out like orientation, paint settings, keyboard navigation, etc. That are all underneath the splitter. If we go back, let's see, the window is the next one. This window is a non-modal HTML window. So it can be moved, resized, loved on a little bit, whatever you want. I won't judge. So yeah, I mean, it's pretty basic, but it's also really cool because having to create your own custom one and then include your theme that you're already using, it's going to be so much easier now that it's a component provided by Kendo UI. Last, but certainly not least, we have released a material theme update. So if you want to check that out, literally under components, hit up styling and then theme material. And I don't think that's the one I'm using right now, but you can, as you see here in the docs, check out all the components, what they look like with it. And I think I hit our time limit on that section. So this grid, I am so super pumped to talk about the updates to the grid. I'm going to switch my camera real quick. So I have npm installed the Kendo grid, and I created a grid component. If I go over here to our tree here. So I created a grid component, and inside that grid component, we have this HTML that we're looking at. And then we also have this component file, which I put the example grid that is populating with, let's go ahead and check out that tasty grid, with these food items. So it's got category IDs, category name, and description. So I want to show you some updates that they've done to the grid so far. So right now, this is how it usually behaves. But if we go ahead and add on an attribute of, reorderable, and we set that to true, save it, go over, and it refreshes, go back to the grid, you will see that now we can click and drag columns so nicely and reorder them how you will. And I can go ahead and bump up this guy so we see it really close up. So yeah, it's very nice reordering happening here. And we have another one called Resizable. And if we set it to true, oh, watch the magic. So you'll notice right now, if I'm hovering over this, there's no options. But if we do the resizable, you'll see that we have this cursor that's like, hey, you can go ahead and resize these columns. Bloop. Lovely, isn't it? And this one has to do with accessibility. So if we set our next attribute to navigable, such a fun word, navigable. We set that to true. And we're going to go ahead, and I have this screen reader that I like to use when testing out things for accessibility, or sometimes for, actually just let it run reading to me. Chromevox. So I'm going to go over to that extension and enable it.
Chromevox spoken feedback is ready.
Now you hear Chromevox talking.
Release webinar, tab.
And we're going to go over to the grid.
Grid, tab selected 2 of 3.
And
Category ID, column header read only not selected.
I just pressed tab and it tabbed into the grid. And as
Category
I go
name, description, soft drinks,
and press
coffees,
the arrow keys,
tea, beverages, condiments, sweet and desserts,
it goes through and reads it. One thing about screen readers, or at least Chromevox, if you're done reading a certain area, so like
confections,
okay, that was
cell
pretty,
not selected.
That was pretty short, but if we go to a long one and we don't really want to listen to the whole thing,
desserts,
you can press enter and end it.
Desserts, candies, and sweet.
So yeah, I want to go and pull up
Windows 2018 release webinar, Dropbox.
She's
Window
still going.
Release extensions, tab.
Disable. Okay. So yes, I want to go back over to my beautiful paper. So we talked about how setting resizable to true can resize the columns nicely. It's so beautiful. We also talked about reordering, how you can drag them around if you set reorderable to true. And the accessibility. So this is a list, a partial list of the keyboard shortcuts that we are offering. Right arrow, left arrow, down arrow, etc. And then once you're actually selected on a cell, you can do like enter to disable keyboard navigation of the grid, escape restores keyboard navigation, tab moves the focus to the next focusable component. So all of these shortcuts and more can be found here at this link, Telerik, Kendo Angular UI components, and then on into the grid, which is what we're talking about, and particularly about the grid keyboard navigation. And so you can read about these and many more, but I wanted to show you all this because, switch back over to my camera, because it's really exciting to be able to navigate through something that wasn't at all accessible before. I want to actually show you, if we go back to our code and we take away navigable, and we're going to turn back on our screen reader. So
grid, tab selected 2 of 3.
If I go and I press tab like we did before, it doesn't even recognize anything else on the page. It just goes right back up to the URL.
A marvelous demo grid.
And then if
tab list with 3
I
items.
actually select
grid tab panel expanded grid table
the grid and like manually click on it, and now I'm like trying to navigate through, it just totally just jumped back up to the TreeView, to the tabs, and is navigating through these. So all right, back to my camera. So yeah, it's really exciting, and I love this feature, and I wanted to show it in action with Chromevox. So that is all that I have for you right now. Thank you so much for letting me give you guys some Angular updates and goodies. Back to you, John.
Thanks, Alyssa. Next up is Ed Charbonneau. Ed's going to show off the new templates we've added to Visual Studio for developers wanting to target Kendo UI with Angular.
All right, ASP.NET developers, you've decided to learn Angular, and you realize there's going to be a bit of a learning curve. For your next project, you'll need to learn TypeScript, NPM, Webpack, and somewhere in the process, you'll want to do some server-side rendering. Now, integrating all of these things into an ASP.NET application can be a challenge. So what if there was an easier way to get up and running so you can integrate faster and learn at a more reasonable pace? That's why we're excited to announce that in this release, we've made a new template available for Kendo UI, Angular, and the ASP.NET stack. This is an all-in-one solution with ASP.NET Core and Angular pre-integrated. Everything is included and pre-configured for NPM, Webpack, and even server-side rendering. The application is organized like a typical ASP.NET MVC application, with the view layer utilizing Angular instead of Razor. This means that we can use familiar concepts on the backend like C#, SQL, Entity Framework, and the Azure ecosystem. It's easy to get started from either Visual Studio or the .NET command line. That's right, you can use the template from the command line while developing on Mac, Linux, and Windows using your favorite editor like Visual Studio. Enough of the hype, let's take a look and see the template in action. To get started from Visual Studio, let's click File, New Project, and then we'll choose Kendo UI for Angular, ASP.NET Core, and VC application. We'll click OK to get started. Now that the application has been created, let's take a look and see what was generated for us. If we take a look under the Dependencies node, you'll see that we have npm. All of the packages have been installed by Visual Studio. As soon as it recognizes that package.json file, it will automatically install all of these dependencies. Next, if we navigate down to the client app folder, this is the folder that contains all of our Angular code and components. Further down, we have controllers. These are normal ASP.NET MVC controllers. And then we have a views folder. Now, the views are a little different in this application. They're only there to bootstrap the Angular application on the client. And the rest of this is configuration, such as the TypeScript config and Webpack config files. Now let's run the application and see what this looks like, and we'll do some experiments with the components that are pre-installed for us. With the application up and running, you can see that we have our components here on the left-hand side, all of which are powered by Kendo UI, built on native Angular code. Now, if we look at our increment component, you can see we have this nice Kendo UI button. If we click on it, it increments this counter. Let's take a look at the source code for this. Again, we're going to go to Client App, Counter, and here you can see the template for that component, as well as the code for that component. If we look at the template, you can see that when we click the Kendo button, we're using this increment counter function. In our counter component, you can see that increment counter function, and all it does is simply increments this current count value from 0, and it increments it by 1. So what I want to do is a little experiment, and let's change this increment method to a decrement method. I'll save this and go back into the browser. Remember, our current count is 4, but this component initializes at 0. So notice that change to 0. And when I click increment, now it decrements. Notice I did not refresh the browser, or you did not see a full page refresh here. That's because the template comes with Webpack's hot module reloading already pre-configured. So all of the code changes were changed on the fly in this view while it's live and running in the browser. How cool is that? Now that you've seen it, let's talk about how you can get it. You can get the new Kendo UI for Angular project template from the Visual Studio Marketplace at marketplace.visualstudio.com, or you can simply click on the Extensions and Updates dialog directly in Visual Studio. For command line users, use the install switch with the .NET new command, followed by the template name, Progress ASP.NET Core SPA Templates Angular. Once you have it installed, just do .NET new, Kendo ng, then run your npm install and .NET run to get started.
Thanks, Ed. Tara Manasik will now walk us through the latest features that have been added to Kendo UI for React and Vue developers.
Hi all, Tara here. I am very excited today to be talking about two awesome things that are happening with the Kendo UI library for React and Vue. First of all, we have brand new, built from the ground up, React components specifically for React. So we'll jump into the grid and drop-down list today, but then I'll show you all the resources to find out more about these awesome components. And also, there are new releases for components in the React and Vue wrapper libraries, so we'll take a look at some of the ones using a vue.js project. Let's go ahead and jump right into the code. I jumped ahead and created a project using Create React App, and you can see the file structure here, so that we could delve right into the Kendo UI fun by first using npm-i to install the Kendo default theme, so we don't have to touch any CSS files and already have pretty things, and the dropdowns. And this is the syntax we use now for these true components, Kendo-React-Component, in this case dropdowns. And since we have an updated version of npm, we don't need -- save, but if you're under version 5, you probably still need it. All right, let's go ahead and clear that out and jump into the code. So you see here we have our app.js file, and that's the first thing we want to jump into so we can import the things that we need from the libraries we just installed, including drop-down list from @progress /kendo-react-dropdowns. Pretty easy flow to remember. Then the next thing we do is also import our default theme. Again, I love this because then I don't have to open CSS files half the time. It just looks good out of the box. But you can also customize everything in the variables, mix-ins in these themes. So the next thing we want to do is build our constructor and feed it in our props, and then feed the super function our props, and move on to setting state with this.state. So the first thing we want to add inside of here, after adding silly semicolons, tweet at me if you don't think semicolons are silly. Show me the way. Anyway, we want to add an array of things that are going to be inside of our drop-down list. So for today, we're going to have ratings drop-down with rad, awesome, stellar, and of course, interstellar with a little alien emoji. It just makes sense. So we're going to jump down inside of our template. So we first just add our component, angle brackets, drop-down list, and pass through the data that we just set inside of state, and that is our ratings. And then we can make this a self-closing component and go ahead and run npm start and build that right up, and we'll take a look, and we have a lovely drop-down list. Again, something that you'll use often for forms and such, built with just those few lines of code very quickly, and it's already styled nice. So let's get a little more complicated and make a robust component in here, a Kendo React grid. So first we want to install that, but along with that, we also want to install the data query library. And we're going to also include Kendo React inputs for functionality inside the grid that we can get to later. And then also Kendo React internationalization, progress Kendo React date inputs. And again, these are all things that I always install when I build a grid for all the future functionality, but today we'll just be covering a basic grid that is sortable. So all of that is installed, and we can go ahead and clear that out and go back to the fun code part. All right, we're back inside app.js. So like the last component, the first thing we want to do is import what we just installed. So inside here, we're going to import the grid, but also the grid column. But we're going to be using it a lot, so we're going to import it as column. And this came from Kendo React grid. But with the data in the grid, since we installed data query, we're going to use order by, because this is the sort functionality that we're doing. So we use order by from data query. And next, I went ahead and made a JSON file of nutritional facts about all food. that I got from the government website on all food facts. And this is to help everybody with their, New Year's resolutions, figure out all the protein, carbs, and sugars in all the food you're eating. You're welcome. So, closing this out, we'll go ahead and start setting these things in state that we want to reference later. So first, nutrition. And we're not just going to straight up pull out that JSON file. We're going to pass an empty array to this .getNutrition function, and sort gets an empty array as well. We'll get into that function later. Allow unsort lets people unsort. So we're going to set that to true. And this .sort change, we need to bind to this inside of this constructor first. So, functions, sort change. This one, we pass the event and set state, semicolons, to nutrition, this .get nutrition. And this will make more sense when you take a look at get nutrition. And we send that event.sort and set sort to event.sort, this new event.sort. So that it has the information of how this information is now sorted. So in get nutrition, we pass sort, so it has the information of what the sort is at this point. And then we know how to order nutrition based on getting the nutrition JSON file array and getting sort. So adding the component. First we enter grid, and now we start sending it in the parameters. So first we're going to do some inline styling with max height, just so it all stays on the page that we're looking at today. This is totally optional. Then more parameters we're going to add inside of the grid component, see we haven't closed it off yet, is the data, because of course a grid needs data. So this .state nutrition sets sortable into this object of allow unsort, which we pass it this .state allow unsort, which could also just be true. And mode we're setting to multiple so that they can sort multiple columns. Okay, so the last thing we need to set inside here is sort, and pass it this .sort and sort change, this function of when the sort changes, it runs the function that we just made up there, this .state.sort change, or this .sort change, my bad. And then we close out grid, finally, or just that opening grid arrow bracket. Now we enter these columns, and these are all nested inside of grid. So first we want to do the field and title, and then close out self-closing tag on column. So what is the field? If you see here, description is the first one we have, and I set it to food because description was kind of vague, but that's what the data source I have used as the header. Measure also didn't really make sense to me, so I chose amount. It's maybe more readable, but no doubt just putting protein here is much more readable than protein in grams by or per measure. So we just need protein there. Just like here, we're not even going to use the whole word carbohydrates. We're just going to write carbs. I hear it's the new in thing to call carbohydrates now. Just kidding. Don't quote me on that. But anyway, this is the exact way that it is referenced in the table of the data that we passed through. So that's exactly what we're putting here. Same for sugar. And again, make sure you have your self-closing tags on the end of column. Grid has so much nested inside of it because all of these columns, but columns can be self-closing. So we'll go ahead and nest these, get that format right, so we understand that they are inside grid. And then we can go ahead and close our grid out. Not grid column, just grid. And something else is up with the formatting. So let's take a look up more. Don't know why. It must be a curly bracket. Oh, there it is. Curly bracket. And if we jump up here, we see that I also missed a comma there. Could have messed us up. No mess ups here though. Let's take a look at it. So we run npm start because remember we closed it to install those new modules. But now we get going and we have a beautiful grid. So again, that styling is already there. It's doing the max height at 500 so we can still see our drop down list. And if we go ahead and click up here, it sorts it once, sorts it in the opposite direction on the second click, and clears the sort on the third click because we allowed that. And since we chose multiple, we can click protein, and the proteins that have the same carbs, like right here, 0.13, will get sorted amongst themselves when we double sort. So I think this grid is definitely interstellar. Fantastic. Now, when you want more information about this, you can go to kendoui.com, go to the React section, and you're here at this webinar, so you don't need that banner. So you could take a look at all these components that we have for React and walk you through the installation and all of the things you need to customize this for everything that you need in particular. And remember, as with all of our components, these are all responsive and come with accessibility standards, internationalization, keyboard functionality. So lots there. And I highly recommend checking all of these awesome built from the ground up for React components out for yourself. Also, stay tuned and pay attention to Kendo UI on Twitter, because we will be having more in-depth videos specifically for React coming up soon. So remember, at Kendo UI on Twitter. Okay, let's jump into Vue. Let's take a new view on this. Sorry, had to do it. Okay, so I went ahead and already made a Vue project using the Vue CLI. So we're going to go ahead and change directory into that project. Slowly but surely. And inside here you see the standard build. I used the PWA template, the Progressive Web App template, because of course I would. Next, we start installing some Vue wrappers, but first the Kendo UI library and the Kendo theme default. So after that, we can go ahead and install both the components we're going to be using today, which is the date inputs for the Datepicker, -vue-wrapper, and then the upload component with Kendo-upload-vue-wrapper. Again, this is the syntax for the Vue wrappers. Kendo component Vue wrapper. So we'll go ahead and install those all at once, and then we're also going to throw them inside of our project all at once so you can see how fast and easy to build what I figured was kind of like a profile where they could enter their birthday with the date picker and then upload a profile picture. So clear this out and let's go into the code. So the files that we'll be using today are just profile and their components, app.vue, and main.js. So in main.js is where we're going to import our date picker and the date picker dateputs installer that we'll need to use it from Progress Kendo Date Inputs Vue Wrapper. And we're going to do the same for upload. So we import, just copy all of this, import upload and upload installer. And of course, we get that from Kendo Upload Vue Wrapper. So those installers, we put them into action using vue.use. And inside there, we pass date inputs installer and upload installer. So to use these things, we also need to pass them into our new Vue. Oh, I had an extra P. Into our new Vue components along with app. So now we just need to add inside of here the date picker and upload. And that is, we also need to go back up to the top and add the library and the theme. So import at progress Kendo UI, our main library, and the Kendo theme default. Look at this lack of semicolons. Doesn't it make life so much easier? Make sure to put the full path from the dist file to all.css. So app.vue, we just deleted all the other stuff and added this profile.vue that we're going to work on now. I'm actually going to change the reference to just name here and make it a little more simple. So inside here, we go ahead and start adding our components. First with Kendo Datepicker, and the data we need to pass to Datepicker with the parameters are the min date, which is obviously the smallest date we want the calendar to reference. Max date is just the opposite. It's the latest date that we want the calendar to reference. And also, we will do the value that we'll put in there as a placeholder, and we'll set that to the current date. And then we'll also do format. I wrote current date, but I'm actually going to change it to this user profile, Toshmagosh's birthday. And we want to set the format and then close out Kendo Datepicker. So the data we're sending in is, who is Toshmagosh, you may ask? Well, obviously, it's who's been typing up all this code as I lead this webinar. Maybe not. Okay, so min date. We have here, we're just going to put 1900 because I don't know who's using this profile, but they may be born in the 1900s. Probably not, though. And then we'll also put 2019 for all our future users. And like I said, instead of current date, we're actually going to put Toshmagosh's birthday, which is 2006 in August, and set that to current date, no matter how untrue it is. Okay, so that is everything that we're passing in there. Now let's go ahead and add the Kendo Upload. So all this needs, it doesn't need any data passed through because we're sending links in here. And the first link we put in here is the async save URL, and this is where you want to save the files that you're putting in here. So for demo purposes, I'm actually just going to hopefully paste the right thing, which is where we save the demos for, or the information for demos.telerik.com. So just saving it somewhere. And then also where we remove it from. So these things, definitely something you want to look into more later when you use this for yourself. And all that documentation I'll point to after this. Also, we want to do the auto upload set to true. And we want to do the credentials, if you want them to do this with credentials or not. I'm going to go false for now, just for this demo, but you have that option there. And then we'll go ahead and close out Kendo Upload. That is all you have to do for the upload file. So that means that we can save this and look at what we have. So you see we have our beautifully styled date picker, even though we didn't hit any styling or do any CSS styling. So you can click through and pick a year, that then leads you to pick a month, that then leads you in to pick a day. And all these interactions come right out of the box. And you can also just type in your input, and even the highlighting comes in the default styling. So put whatever date you want, and it automatically formats it after you're done typing. For our upload files, we just click the button, find this amazing picture of Toshi working again, and there you go. You have the option to also retry and delete that file. So all of these components live here, kendoui.com. You can go to the Vue components. So there are a ton of components here that you can use, and all of these are the same for the React wrappers as well. So we're trying to get more and more of these React and Vue wrappers. It's such a tongue twister. And so all the things I was talking about before for upload, you can look more into it here in this documentation as well, as seeing how to initialize it with CDN and with Webpack. So again, great information to check out in the documentation. Highly recommend reading through there and checking out the demos. More information to come. Stay tuned on Kendo UI and at TZ Mannix, which is me.
Thanks, Tara. Great stuff. Now, on the Kendo UI team, we've been working hard on providing you with a better idea of what's coming so you can plan accordingly. Carl, what's there?
taking a look at our roadmap, a couple of items that I want to highlight coming out with the next release would be the conversational UI, aka chatbot UI component for all flavors of Kendo UI. We'll also be introducing the new drop-down tree widget, something that the folks on the ASP.NET Ajax side might have been able to take advantage of so far. And we'll also go ahead and work with our material theme and add that in for the jQuery suite. Of course, the React components have just started, so we'll continue to expand on the functionality of all existing components and introduce new ones. On the Angular side, we'll be taking a look at adding the menu, tooltip, toolbar, and a couple of other widgets alongside with additional material theme support. And on the Vue side, we'll look to include more components, of course, similar to what we're doing on the jQuery side, as well as what other Vue ecosystem libraries we can support, like for example, Vuex, and additional resources for our Vue developers.
Wonderful stuff, Carl. Thanks for that. Just before we wrap things up, I'd like you to know that we'll be hosting the Progress Next conference from May 29th to June 1st in beautiful Boston, Massachusetts. Registration is now open and filling up fast. You can find out more and register at www.progress.com/next. There's one more thing that I'd like to share with you. Very soon, we'll be launching a new 24/7 on-demand training program with more than 30 hours of technical content that's designed to quickly get you onboarded and successful with our developer tools, whether you've been using them for years or are new to the suite. Valued at over $10,000, this offering will be free with your license subscription. These videos will provide practical knowledge combined with helpful approaches to application development across a wide range of our offerings, including Kendo UI, Telerik UI for ASP.NET Ajax, MVC, Xamarin, WPF, WinForms, Telerik reporting, and more. Watch your inbox in early February for more details. So that about wraps it up for us. On behalf of the team, I'd like to thank you for joining us for today's webinar. Please make sure to keep an eye out on our blogs for more articles about this or for any other future announcements. And in the meantime, please go check out the latest bits and tell us what you think. Thanks again, and we hope to see you next time.